Hi-ho, Kermit the Frog. Time to talk some shit with Powell on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and winter is finally here. Well, it's technically still summer, but I'm starting to get ski and snowboard magazines and the movie premieres have started. So while it's not even fall, snow media says that it's time to start thinking about winter, and that's a good thing in my book. I'll have a few more summer podcasts coming through the pipes, along with a trip to Rampage, but the focus now is on snow. And my guest this week is Pep Fujas. He's a skier who redefined style and landing switch at the turn of the century, and he's influenced so many people that have been on the podcast. I worked with him in my K2 days, and I really needed to get him on the show. I'm friends with Pep, and I had him on a different podcast I did a long time ago, and that interview barely touched the surface of who Pep was and what he's done. So I re-edited the best 20 minutes of that podcast and then recorded another hour with Pep so we can dive headfirst into his life and times. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on, and tell your friends about the show. Finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors. They are Evo, Spy Optic, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Braden Pepperell Fujas. When you grew up, it was a totally different world than the world you're in now. You were raised in a yurt, and I don't know how many years you grew up in a yurt. I don't know if there was electricity, heat, or what the bathroom situation was like, but it sounds like a different experience than most Americans have.
Yeah, 100%. It's a totally different experience. Where did I even start? Yeah, I lived in the yurts for 9 or 10 years.
Damn, that's a long time.
Yeah, I think we had one in the beginning. Then I think when I was maybe 2 or 3, they built the second one. So one was dedicated to living area and kitchen. And then the second one was where we slept and hung out. But we didn't have electricity, I don't think, until I was maybe 6 or 7. We didn't have a telephone until kind of right around that time. And my parents were building their business. They were organic farmers and transitioned that business into gourmet foods manufacturing. And so they built a plant. And at that time, we ended up getting running water, showers, laundry, all those luxurious things that people have in today's world. My childhood was quite a bit different. My parents still tried to let us see the world and different cultures and that. So they made an effort to do some trips with us. I remember going to Europe a couple times as a young one.
So it was a conscious choice to live in a yurt and just work on the land. It wasn't like, this is what we can have as a yurt. It was kind of like, this is what we're doing and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff kind of fell into their lap, so to speak. They were both maritime people. My dad was a ship captain for quite a few years. He kind of lived his life on the sea for probably like 30 or 40 years. My mom was a cook for somebody in like the America's Cup races, and she loved traveling and exploring. They met in the West Indies and they dropped everything. They said, we want to raise our kids in like a really simple environment. And they drove up and down the West Coast and ended up finding this beautiful piece of property outside of Ashland and like sold pretty much everything, bought the property, bought a tractor, and they didn't really know anything about farming. And yeah, started farming. I think someone kind of mentioned to them like, oh, there's kind of a cheap housing option, or there might have been even like a free yurt, like you come and dismantle it and it's yours. And it was really cool. I wish I still had photos of it. I think I've like come across a few here and there, but it was kind of 2-story. Like it was built up on a platform and we had a big deck that kind of swept out in the front with a staircase going down, and in front there was like our personal garden, and my parents had found this wood-fired hot tub, and we kind of had like a makeshift shower out there as well.
What did friends say when they came over and spent the night?
I think people were really, really stoked. It was really comfortable and low means, but a great environment. It was fairly cush for what it was. And we had like 300 acres, so every kid loves to like go and explore and check out like what's behind every rock and bush. And we had an in-ground trampoline and a couple ponds you could go swim in. So there's never a shortage of activities to go do.
I just picture a camp, 2 yurts, 300 acres, and you guys able to do whatever you want, come home when it's dark.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like my parents were working crazy hours, like you never really sleep on a farm. There's always stuff to be done. So, I remember picking basil when I was 5 years old. My parents would give us like 10 cents for like a bucket of basil, which is kind of slave labor.
Parents are allowed to do that. There's no laws against that, I don't think.
Nope.
How did you get into skiing? Were your parents skiers or did you get into it on your own?
My parents skied occasionally. My mom was from the East Coast, didn't really ski much growing up, and skied a little bit in Europe. But we had a family friend, Jerry Frankowiak. He loved skiing, and he took us out on little old telemark skis kind of around the property. And then at some point, he took us up to Mount Ashland. And I think my mom went with us a little bit, my dad a little bit as well. But I don't know. I really took to it, and so did my sister. And it was a great place to go drop the kids off for the day and just let them have at it.
Did they put you in any kind of program there? I'm sure they didn't just drop you off on the mountain, but was it a ski school, a race program, a freestyle program? What were you in?
Actually, no program. No, they just dropped us off and we just got to ski. We also had some other family friends, the Briggses and Miranda and Adam. And Adam was a race coach for the ski team, and I think Miranda was too at some point. And every once in a while, I could drop in on them. I don't think that was until I was in middle school, but I tried to stay away from the race program. We didn't have a bump program. We just had the Mount Ashland Racing Association. But my buddy Zach in middle school, he finally convinced me to join the program when I was 12. So I did that for a year. But yeah, before that, I was a late bloomer when it came to poles. Like I never really saw the need. And then at one point, I think I just ended up picking them up, probably at like 11, maybe.
Are there other sports that you're doing? What else is going on in your world?
I like some other sports. I played soccer. I always wanted to play football. I think I did some flag football really young, and then they didn't really like contact sports, and I don't really blame them for that. And then I got into skateboarding probably around 8 or 9 or something like that, and kind of stuck with me for quite a while. And then later on, I got into kayaking. I don't know. I've loved any kind of sport.
Was soccer the only organized team sport you played?
I did cross country as well. But yeah, soccer was the main gig.
When did you realize that skiing was something that was more than just a hobby or an activity for you and something that could take you further?
My parents had another family friend who had gone away to a ski academy. I think when I was 11, I learned of that. And of course, we knew about Colorado, and we'd see the Warren Miller movies when they'd come to town. And I guess just from skiing a lot and around the mountain, like I was one of the best kids at that time. And I was like, wow, I'd really like to get into either racing or mogul skiing. And, I had, dreams of going to the Olympics. And so, yeah, I think at that point I decided like, hey, I really love this and I'd like to pursue it in some respect. And my parents were fairly adamant about getting out of the Rogue Valley for a better education. So going to boarding school. So my sister ended up going to boarding school 2 years before me to like a prep school back east. And then they gave me the option as well to either go to boarding school for high school or to pay for college. So I opted for ski school.
These types of schools are pretty expensive. You can choose college or high school, and you're putting all your eggs into high school. Do you know that your ability is something that can take you somewhere where you're not going to need college?
No, absolutely not. I went to a mogul camp and to a race camp the summers before I went away to boarding school, just to kind of see where I excelled and what I meshed well with. And I ended up choosing mogul skiing because it was a lot more free and fun, and I just really enjoyed the atmosphere a lot better. It wasn't like crazy strict, which later down the line, I realized it's kind of the same. Those camps showed me that I had a lot of room to grow, but figured like, hey, I'll go this first year and see how it goes. And went out there. I ended up getting the Rookie of the Year for the Rocky Mountain Division. And they had this thing called like the medals testing. And I got like a gold pass to every ski resort in Colorado. And my coach, he saw a lot of potential in me and promise. So he definitely pushed for me to stay with the program. And I was super into it as well.
How far did mogul skiing take you through high school?
I got up to like going to junior nationals. I went to selection events one year, but I never could take it to like that level where I was consistently in the top 10. I think the best I ever did in a mogul contest was like, third or fourth in the division.
I don't see you as the cutthroat competitor out there, but that's just me from 30,000 foot view. How was it as an actual competitor for you?
I definitely wasn't cutthroat, and I just always tried to do the best that I could. I think I was a little bit of a head case in a lot of the scenarios. Like I'd ski really well in training and then, get super, super nervous and sometimes fall apart and explode or whatever. I guess that's kind of what made me want to move on from it because, it was so intense. Contests were just so crazy intense. I was like insanely nervous all the time and definitely took the fun out of skiing a little bit for me. And I met a lot of guys during summer camps, actually. I'd go up to summer camp in Whistler and met Tanner and CR and just a whole slew of guys up there. And I think those connections, they were always saying like, hey, you should switch over to free skiing, come free ski with us. And finally, in my senior year, I ended up finagling my way into a couple free ski contests, the US Open and Parkasaurus and a couple others. I just fell in love with that side of the sport.
You started gravitating away from moguls. There's contests in the other side of skiing as well, but they're not as serious, I would think, as a moguls contest. There is no FIS telling you what you can and can't do. It's more about freedom on the other side. And when you get to the other side, are there any inspirations for you? Because right now, if you talk to a lot of the kids out there and ask who inspired them, they're going to say your name and the style that you brought to the table inspired them. But when you were them, just an up-and-comer, who inspired you?
I definitely looked a lot to the Canadian Air Force. They were big then. JF was a huge inspiration. Same with JP. Same with Tanner. I skied moguls with him for quite a while, and I always enjoyed watching him ski. Also, Mikhail Deschanel. He had just really smooth, like super greasy, carefree style, which was so fun to watch. There were tons of guys with like a lot of different stuff going on. Skogan was doing rad stuff at that point. Same with Pollard. And I was kind of mesmerized by the early ski movies like State of Mind and Degenerates. And of course, The Game. We probably watched that at least 3 times a week when I was in high school.
You got into Parkasaurus. You were opening up people's eyes. There was an Oakley shoot where I think there was a gap to rail. You started building your name for a while, blew people's minds, and then I think the sponsors came.
In mogul skiing, through my affiliation with the Winter Sports Club there, if you were kind of a top level athlete that didn't have any real sponsors, like the top 2 after that would get flow from a couple of different companies. And I ended up getting some flow from Oakley. And that's how I met Greg Strokes. And so, I went to Parkasaurus that year. And right after Parkasaurus, Tanner invited me to come up to Mammoth and shredded them up there. So I took that opportunity during spring break. And I think the second week I was there, Oakley was doing a photo shoot with JP and Tanner and Yoon and Boyd. A few of those guys. They were doing a shoot in the pipe, and I was cruising lap after lap through there. And they asked me like, hey, do you want to shoot some photos in the pipe? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And Pat Mack came up to me while I was hiking the pipe at one point and said, hey, we'd really like to sponsor you if you're into that. I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And he's like, oh, you should join us for the rest of the shoot. And then I think the next day we did a gap trail.
Is that your first paid contract? Is that where money starts coming into your career from skiing?
Yeah, exactly. They were like, well, we'll pay for some travel to get you to contests and give you a little bit of a stipend as well. And of course, like photo incentive and stuff like that. It's kind of really excited, to say the least. And so right after that, I moved to Mammoth. Going into the season, I think like maybe the first or second month that this ski season was going, I got a call from Mike Goot from K2, and I'd been skiing with Rory Silva, and I think he got my number through him. He said, hey, like we'd love for you to get on our skis and try them out, and we can talk sponsorship.
Once one comes, then other people start hearing about you more, and it really does start picking up, and then you develop other sponsors from all over the place. There's so much to your story, and we only have so much time, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I will say that 1242, the video part that you had, was probably one of the most game-changing parts that came out in skiing. It brought another level of style to the table. A lot of kids today can look to that part as something that really influenced them, and I think that just needs to be said. You were with K2, you'd helped develop the Public Enemy, and you started to get pro models. Your first pro model was affordable ski. What was the thought process behind your first pro model?
I wanted to ski with like kind of a unique flex pattern. We were trying to emulate a bit of, what snowboarders were doing, nose pressing and tail pressing on their boards. And so I wanted a flex pattern that was kind of stiff in the very tip. Then it had a little bit of a softness, flex point, and then stiffer underfoot, same in the back. Yeah, we did like a bunch of rounds of testing. I guess luckily the way it was built, it didn't cost a whole lot. So it ended up being a price point ski. That more came from Goot. He was like, I know you have like another offer on the table from Rosignol and it looks a bit better on paper, but we have the potential to sell like a ton of skis and you're not getting a pro model with them. And of course, like I really wanted to have influence in the design of the ski. And I think it's definitely a cool thing to have your name associated with that ski. So yeah, we went into the design process and he was like, we should make this a price point ski. I know with your name recognition and everything, it's going to blow off the shelves. And it sure did. We sold 10,000 pairs that first year.
That's got to be a huge win for you. Not only do you get a signature product, be able to sell so many that you're not worried about your next meal, which is something that I'm sure during most of your ski career up until then you probably were.
Yeah, fairly so. It was definitely kind of a dirtbag sport, and there were some people that had made it. That definitely solidified my position financially. I was able to buy a house down in Salt Lake, and it was a super shock getting that check in the mail. I can still remember the day. I think I even saved the check stub, and Goot was like quiet about it. He's like, yeah, you should be getting a royalty check. It's pretty good. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, I wonder what that means. And then when the zeros were on the back, I was like, holy shit.
From the K2 end at that point, they didn't know that many were going to sell, and they were blown away as well.
Yeah.
You're at a point in your career now where you're comfortable. Then you work with Eric Pollard and Andy Mayer, and you create Nimbus, which was well ahead of its time. Content that you're putting out for free on the internet. How did that concept come together? How involved were you with every detail of Nimbus?
Let's see. We started with idea that was presented by Andy Mayer. He was like, I think it would be awesome to do a movie with Eric and Pep. And he talked to Iberg about that. And Iberg was like, yeah, let's do that. They contacted me and then, we were on board kind of right away. And Eric was like, I kind of want to give you guys the reins after this and see what you guys can do with it. And yeah, Eric took that upon himself to be the point man. And of course, because he already had a lot of editing skills and a lot of experience in the industry already. The year after idea, we're like, all right, well, what's next? Like, we definitely want to stay on this path. We love having this creative control of the final product. And it's just such a fun time to be able to ski with people that you really enjoy skiing with and get along with. So Eric did most of the groundwork and behind the scenes. I mean, he did so much. It's kind of mind blowing at this point, especially because we were so spaced out across the country. Andy was in Washington, he was in Oregon, and I'm out in Utah. So it was really tough to coordinate on a lot of things, but it was about like each person doing their respective parts to gather sponsorship money to make the wheels turn. And I mean, shit, I've got to give it to Eric. He did so much extra work just to provide the opportunity for us to do Nimbus. Like, I couldn't tell you how many edits he's done for various companies just to get the funding that we needed to make it work. So it's really like a passion thing.
He's taken on the role of desk jockey and athlete, it sounds like, and doing both really well. And that's a tough thing to do because there's not that much time in the day. It was also the time that you went no poles, and that was a controversial thing in the ski world. You and Andy Mayer, I don't know if there's any others that jumped on that trend, but a lot of the edits and a lot of the content that was coming out was with no poles. And how did that come about?
Eric was riding no poles like back before that, like him, Griffin Cummings, and his crew in Oregon. And Andy was doing it a little bit. I don't know. I think like just on hill, sometimes we drop the poles and you just get to experience a different way to move on the mountain. Like your hands are free, like you can feel free to like brush the snow. And since you're not thinking about having the poles in your hand, you can move in a lot of different ways. And it really actually starts to refine your style and movements. It kind of starts to quiet everything down. Cause like if you have really erratic hand movements, it just looks terrible. And it's really hard to make skiing without poles like look really good. So I think it was just like another way to like express yourself on skis, and it was really fun. And we didn't really care what anybody thought.
Then came the X Games, and while we're not going to talk about your career that much in competition, although you did have a competitive career, you did go to the X Games with Andy Mayer, and you competed. I don't know if you had poles or not. I don't think you did, but competed in the X Games on hellbents, and there's a little controversy around that because a couple guys didn't get into the X Games, and then saw you guys out there on hellbents.
We weren't actually on hellbents. We were on a Rockered AK Maiden, which was a little bit narrower, but still had the hellbent graphic on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we were kind of wild cards, and we're not really in this competitive arena anymore. And unfortunately, like we didn't really care about doing really well.
I understand the thought process.
Yeah. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of have fun. And unfortunately, like the course was really, really slow that year. I think I got a wax job right before. I wasn't able to make like a couple of the jumps anyway. But yeah, since we weren't riding with poles, it seemed stupid for us to like pick up poles just for one contest. Why not go and have fun and show like a different style of our sport? I remember thinking like, oh man, we should give up our spots. But at the same time, we're like, well, they let us in. So,
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're not the ones who said, hey, we want to be in this. Yeah. That's not on your shoulders. Whatever you guys do with it is what you do with it. And at that point in your careers, you guys weren't going to win. Some of the stuff those guys are doing is crazy at that point. You guys are there to have fun and then go film a video part probably somewhere within 2 hours of the contest, I would think.
Yep.
Now it is time for me to take a quick sponsor break. My first sponsor is Evo. And if you haven't been to Evo's stores in Seattle, Portland, Denver, or Whistler, or visited their website, evo.com, you are missing out on the best deals in action sports and beyond. Evo has something for everyone in the family, and they always have a great sale going on. They carry all the best brands in bike, surf, skate, wake, ski, and snowboard, and have all the clothing and outerwear you'll need for your adventure or just to look great when it's time to head back to school or the bar. Right now, you can find some great end-of-season deals on bikes and surfboards, and check out all the new ski and snowboarding gear that's hitting the floor daily over at Evo. Evo offers free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and a no-hassle return policy. Please support the show by buying everything you need from Evo. My next sponsor is Stanley, another iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that iconic green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a lot more these days. They still are all about adventure. They still are all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created. And they have always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you are still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment. And now I'm making it easier than ever to do that. You can save 30% on all Stanley products when you head on over to stanley-pmi.com, buy some stuff. When you check out, enter the code POWEL, the number 30, that's all one word, and you're done. I should also mention that when you buy from Stanley, you are also supporting cool projects like this podcast and the new movie from Matchsticks Productions. Those are my sponsors. We did a little podcast a few years ago. We talked about your upbringing, getting into skiing, getting sponsored, video parts, blah, blah, blah. Since we did that podcast, I figured out what I'm doing, and I've interviewed a shitload of other people since then. And when I talk to them about influential skiers, your 1242 segment, your 2002 masterpiece comes up. It changed the game for a lot of skiers. When you were putting that segment together, did you have any clue that it would be a segment so ahead of its time?
First of all, I like that you're claiming that you know what you're doing now. I think that's great. I still have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, you're only like 3 weeks in.
Oh, I would just meant life in general.
Oh, I don't know what I'm doing in life.
Let's see. There were certainly some clues that I tied into that relationship between having a part that was going to blow some minds. The idea that it was going to change everything wasn't really on my mind. But the session where I did the 180 in Blackwood Canyon with CR and Tanner and Evan, they were just like, you have no idea what you just did. Like, that was insane. They were kind of speechless and super excited at the same time. And then in that other session where I landed the back-to-back fives, Lou was like, that was crazy. That's something that just changed skiing for me forever. And I think that was one of his last years skiing.
People weren't landing switch like you were landing. So it was one of those shocking things that the gear was there to do it, but no one was doing it like you were.
I mean, there were a couple other people that were landing backwards. I know Tanner was landing backwards, and Eric and Mikkel. Yeah, there was a small handful, but nothing was done to that size, I guess.
When that movie came out, people were talking about it right away. It was game changing. And does that change everything for you as an athlete?
Yeah, it certainly made my imprint in the ski industry and helped me pay the bills for many years to come.
Is it weird being that young and not having people know who you are as much? Then that segment comes out and all of a sudden any ski town you go to, you're a ski town celebrity?
Yeah, I guess that's a little strange. I don't remember being like, oh my God, that's Pep, or I don't remember any of that kind of stuff going on, but maybe I was just oblivious to it.
You probably are, because I think people still do that when they see you, whisper behind your back that that's Pep. One thing we didn't talk about was living with Tanner. You guys are on the forefront of everything that's going on. Was that a special time in the way that you were able to push each other?
Yeah, certainly. On a day-to-day basis, we could go out and just session with each other and learn from each other. We both have distinctly different styles, and I think watching each other helped ourselves develop our techniques. Yeah, we could just kind of feed off each other's energy, and he had a little bit of a different mentality than I did. Like, he was very focused on doing things repetitively. He'd hit a jump and do cab nines for like a couple hours, the same kind, until he kind of perfected it, where I wanted to do different tricks all the time, kind of whatever I felt like doing. I didn't really want to have such a structured mentality, but watching that, I don't know, it was inspiring how dedicated he was to getting things exactly the way he wanted.
I hear lots of stories about Tanner Hall's work ethic and how not many people rival what he does behind the scenes to make himself a great skier. Was he doing that back then when you were living with him?
A little bit, certainly not to the extent that he is now. Probably for the past decade, he goes to the gym all the time. He's always at Woodward. He's just always training and thinking about skiing, and it's absolutely inspiring in many senses. But no, I think he was more into like going out and going to the skate park and having fun in his free time instead of like dedicating himself to staying strong and fit and healthy.
Have there been different phases of your career where you're more into exercise and getting fit and getting into ski shape compared to maybe when you were younger where it was just partying and skiing?
I've always wanted to be healthy and stay strong. But yeah, that component of my life is fairly defined. And at least now, like, I have to exercise every day for some amount of time or else I get pretty cranky. I need those like endorphins, and I like to feel healthy, both in my body and mind. I've certainly understood a bit of the importance of strength and body awareness and musculoskeletal structure. Yeah, your own physiology and how that kind of relates to your performance in the outdoors.
And are you like the rest of us humans where as ages come on, you actually need to stretch and do things that you didn't need to do at 19?
Absolutely. Yeah. I try to go to do yoga like 3 to 4 times a week.
I'm going to talk a little more about those mammoth years. You went skiing with Plake once. He took a whole crew of new school skiers out on old school skis, old straight ones. And do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, vividly. That was amazing. I mean, he's like one of the most fun and inviting and like inclusive people that you'll ever meet. Just like high energy, stoked all the time. And he peppered me throughout the year, like, dude, let's get out on straight skis. I'm like, yes, absolutely. I would love to do that with you. He's like, I have like a huge quiver. Like, let's get all your friends together and let's go shred. It ended up being like fairly spontaneous. He has a little apartment. It was in the main building at Mammoth. It was right over the park. And he just grabbed me one day, and like I grabbed a handful of people and we went up and rallied on like 210s, and yeah, we just went straight up to the top and bombed runs for like 4 or 5 hours straight.
Twister spreads and daffies, that kind of stuff?
It was more like hauling ass, going as fast as we could. I mean, it's pretty hard to get those skis twisted around, like they're so heavy.
Plake is one of those guys who's a legend in the sport, and he always will be. Do you have any other memorable experiences with Plake over your career? Because I know you spent a lot of time with him at K2 shoots. What sticks out about Plake?
He was always so wiry and like inviting, like he invited us out to his compound a few times and would talk about his barefoot skiing with his wife, Kimberly, driving the boat. And he always had tons and tons of stories. I remember going to some premieres with him, or like some shop demos in like random places in Philadelphia. And we'd go into these shops and he would know all sorts of people who had come into the store and then be able to relate with them personally about maybe a tour that he did 8 years ago and would remember the days and what they did and their names. And that was mind blowing to me. He could just like relate to everybody, and his memory was that good.
It's amazing what you can do with a clear head.
It sure is.
Well, I'm going to take it back to some films that we didn't talk about in the first podcast because I didn't know what I was doing back then. And when I say films, I'm only going to talk about one, really. It's Afterglow, and that was more of a piece that was really phenomenal. I mean, you've been in over 20 movies, but this one I feel like takes the cake in terms of preparation, in terms of what you need to load into the backcountry, in terms of everything you need to do. There's no more challenges than what come with this Afterglow shoot. If you haven't seen it, it's online. Pep's wearing a light suit, skiing at night. You guys took 10,000 pounds of gear into the backcountry. How much of a pain in the ass is that?
That's probably an understatement. It's kind of a pain in the whole body. Yeah, everything had to be moved around manually. There was an old snowmobile that was stored at the cabin we were at, and we didn't necessarily have permission to use it, but we still used it for like really short jaunts. And then unfortunately it shit the bed at one point. And then of course we had to inform GAH that we had not only used the sled, but we had broken the sled. And so, yeah, all of the lights had to be positioned manually, all the generators to power those lights. And we shot in 5 different locations, and it snowed 8 days out of the 2 weeks we were there, which means there was lots of snow. So it was deep, and, that just compounds the struggle.
That's a good thing, except for in a shoot like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hats off to like Cody. He was one of the helpers, like the lodge managers, but he ended up doing like tons and tons of grunt work and preparation for us, as well as Shane Treat. We definitely wouldn't have gotten the whole project done if it wasn't for Shane. When you have to refill generators, when it's freezing at night with gasoline and he's getting gas on his hands, and that just like compounds how cold everything is. But it was just kind of a sufferfest in that regard.
Is it terrain where if it was light out, it wouldn't be as gnarly, or is it just straight up gnarly terrain?
There wasn't too much gnarly terrain. I mean, a lot of the pillow lines were really short. There was a head wall that was a little bit bigger and certainly pretty tricky. It was like, it's a convex roll. I know there's a shot of me. I get blinded by some slough and come out of the slough, super backseat, have to hop onto a pillow, and just sailed ass over tea kettle over the whole face. That was the only really technical terrain. There were a couple bigger faces that we skied, but they were fairly open. And then skiing through the trees at night was certainly a bit challenging. It was hard to position the lights so you could actually see. We did a couple shots where you weren't in the light suits in the dark to get like that contrast of how it is skiing without the suits on and then with the suits on. Like when you're in the suit, it was incredible how much light those things give off, and you can see really well, at least about 15 to 20 feet in front of you. But as soon as like snow comes up in your face, that light also reflects off the white crystals and then blinds and shrinks your pupils, and then you come out of it and then your eyes need to readjust to the darkness. And that was one of the real challenges, that extreme contrast.
Are you working with Philips on the design of the suits and everything that's going on, or is that all the production team and you're the athlete?
That was mostly the production team. I mean, out there, we constantly had problems with connectivity of the batteries to the lights. And Max, he didn't know how to solder, but he learned very quickly. I mean, he was fixing those things almost every day. Sometimes we would be like ready to go, and all of a sudden a couple of the bands would short out, or part of it was not lit up, and we'd have to like, all right, gotta go on hold for another hour and get this fixed.
Lots of hurry up and wait just because of technical difficulties.
Indeed, that was a very good way to say it.
You've been one of the most epic film skiers of our time, and through no fault of your own, the medium is kind of disappearing. I mean, your year used to be, we're going to focus on a movie part or 2 parts or 3 parts. Now that has kind of gone away, and it's a different mindset. How do you look at the whole landscape of ski media now?
My viewpoint has kind of fluctuated, and I don't think it's really gone too far away. I mean, there's the Marcus Etters of the world who are absolutely pushing our sport hard, and Sammy Carlson and Wiley. There is still a lot of bigger ski media and really beautifully shot and presented. I'm really excited to see the Level 1 movie. I'm also excited to see the Matchstick movie because it was a very small crew, and there's a lot of good energy and new ways to like hit the same kind of features. I don't know if there's stagnation or there's also a bit of dilution because of how much social media has played a part in skiing. It's dispersed and kind of segmented skiing, I guess, into different categories.
Social has definitely diluted the waters, like you've said. I'll jump into your product life. We did talk about the ski that made you all that money at K2 back in the day when you had a royalty and you sold a shitload of them. But you had plenty of other skis at K2. And how many pro models did you get while you were there?
You know what? I haven't counted, but I think it's right around 11 or 12.
And if you had to pick a favorite, which one would be the favorite?
The first one was probably my favorite because it was so fresh and new and playful. And I guess as things developed, I really liked the second year Kung Fujas. The graphic is an old Japanese scroll.
Yep.
What it looks like. That was probably my favorite as far as like performance, all around fun, mid-fat.
Everybody's everyday ski.
Yeah.
You were on K2 when McConkey was on K2. How does his push for rocker design change your perspective on skiing and what you wanted in your pro models?
I didn't feel like rocker had a huge place in my pro models just because of its mid-range. It was like positioned in the middle of the range. I still like that playful aspect that rocker gives you on a more traditional ski. But yeah, I think it was fairly minimal. I didn't really employ too much rocker on my pro model skis.
When you got on a pair of rocker skis, did that change everything in powder for you?
Oh yeah, 100%. Especially landing backwards. You had to be so incredibly precise. And then, I remember getting on some prototypes down in New Zealand. They arrived like halfway through the season, and I was there with Bornowski and JP and a few other guys. First day I got on them, we had luckily gotten probably like 5 or 6 inches of snow. And I got on them, and I was just like a kid in a candy store, trying to land backwards off of everything. And the majority of the time I'd land it. Anthony's like, hey man, can I give those a try? And I was like, absolutely. Like, you have to. These things are incredible. We went up the next day and he got on a pair and he was just like, dude, this is cheating. This like makes skiing so much easier. The landscape of what you can do on skis is just opened up to whole new possibilities.
Now it is time for me to get into my final set of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Spy Optic. Spy has spent the past 25 years innovating the sunglass game But more importantly, they've spent 25 years making you look good. The artists, athletes, and designers over at Spy not only live and breathe the action sports lifestyle, they like to party and try new things. And the newest of new is the 50/50 collection. Spy took the iconic frames, the Flynn, Discord, Cyrus, and Helm, and took their bottoms off. Literally. They stripped down these popular frames, leaving them semi-rimless and ready for some action. It's an awesome upgrade to the glasses I already love. And if you wear sunglasses and listen to this podcast, support me, save some money, and make yourself look good by heading over to Spy Optic, pick out some sunglasses. I highly recommend the Helm 50/50. Head to checkout and save 20% by entering the code POWEL20. That's all one word and the number 20. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing my favorite Northwest beer since 2006, and they have a couple of new flavors that I'm going to tell you about. The first is Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA that kind of reminds me of Out of Office. It's got a great flavor, and a percentage of sales benefit the Surfrider Foundation. The second beer, Smash, is a lighter wheat ale that I drank a ton of while I was in Bend. You can't go wrong with either of these beers, and they're great to drink outside. And 10 Barrel is all about drinking beer outside and supporting all things snow. You can find out a lot more about the company and the beer over at Fully Aligned. That's 10 Barrel's brand new podcast that lets you peek behind the curtain over at 10 Barrel. Next time you're at the store, buy some 10 Barrel and support the brand that really makes a difference in the sports we love, the 10 Barrel Brewery. Those are my sponsors. Now we are going to get back into the podcast. What was the last year of the Kung Fujas?
2016.
How do you find out that you aren't getting one?
That's a good question. So at that time, there seemed to be a lot of reorganization going on. K2 wasn't meeting their metrics and they weren't doing really well. So I think one of the impetus was we need to get rid of pro models, like recoup these margins, but also in doing so, they could promote a more inclusive influence. And so that's how it was broken to me. It was like, we want to move away from this specific pro model formula and move to like an inclusive athlete designed model. That's how they broke it to me.
Were you pissed when you heard that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be pissed. You expect a pro model at this point, I would think.
Yeah, I was pretty hurt. And after that, I actually was off of K2 for a year. They essentially bought out my contract for the next year and a half.
That was a weird fucking thing, right?
Yeah.
That happened to a bunch of guys, and it didn't have to do with the K2 people. I was there at the time. We were owned by a company, Jardin, and they wanted to buy out all the athlete contracts so there were no athlete contracts outstanding so it would look clean on paper the next year for some reason. You and a couple other people were no longer part of the program, but you kept skiing on the skis, I believe.
I did. I was kind of torn because I still loved the skis and I knew that I had a lot of like brand equity with them.
You're branded K2 at that point. When people think K2, they think Pep.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, maybe next year we can renegotiate after all of this mess is cleaned up. Maybe they'll see the value in having me be a part of the team and they'll essentially give me the remuneration that I'm asking for. At that point, I was still skiing the skis and I didn't really want to go out of my way to like find a new partner at that time.
Is it embarrassing when that happens? Because you have to deal with a whole lot of questions. What's going on with K2? And you don't even know at that point because no one really does.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much what I said. I mean, despite like, I'm kind of disgruntled with the way things shook out, but I'm like, it's their business and I really hope they survive.
And they came through and they were able to get you back on the program. But when you come back on K2, I think it's in a different role. Like, hey, Pep, we're going to bring you on as a development role, not an athlete role, which is weird because you're an athlete, not an engineer. Is that correct in my thinking of how you were brought back on?
Yeah, exactly. They wanted me to have a lot more influence on the ski design, which is funny. I was pretty involved with my pro model design, but they wanted to have more impact on like all the other skis in the line.
Were you going to all the development meetings and were they taking what you had to say to heart and actually influencing the skis with them?
Yeah, I mean, the ASIM skis came out of a suggestion I had when I happened to be up at GAH and had taken some Pinnacle skis up there for that shoot as backup and ended up using them and really liked how the taper was and the tip. They ended up performing really well. And then I just kind of got to thinking about how a lot of people ski in the backcountry, and in a lot of situations, we use our downhill ski the majority of the time, and our uphill ski is just kind of waiting to be engaged until the next inside turn. You only weight like the outside of your ski with maybe 30% of your weight or something at any given time, unless you're racing or skiing bumps or something. So I was like, oh, maybe this kind of taper could work on the outside and you could still have a traditional platform on the inside for initiating in snow. And that was kind of the impetus behind the ASIM technology that we came out with.
That was a weird one for the consumer because it's really tough to tell the ASIM story to the consumer and them understand it. So I think that ski might have been a challenge to sell through based on it being ASIM. But what I heard about that ski was that the model that made it to the market might not have been the one that you signed off on.
Yeah, that's true.
What was the difference?
It was a slightly different flex pattern, but yeah, we had done, I think, 3 rounds of testing and I wasn't included on the 4th round. I was on vacation at that time and I didn't hear about it for a while. They're like, oh yeah, we decided to go with this version. I was like, oh, okay.
And you just have to smile and ski the ski?
Pretty much. That technology was also originally built for a powder ski, but they weren't ready in that line cycle to implement it in that ski. So they're like, oh, well, is this something that could work on a narrower waist? And so I tested that and it was good, but it's certainly not as good as like the catamaran that came out. I really liked that ski.
So on the skinnier ski, it's just a marketing story. On the catamaran, it's the fully functional technology.
I mean, I think there's still some function to it on the narrower waist, but it doesn't give as many benefits as the wider ski does.
Okay. Around 2012 or so, you're getting a little bit older. I would think it's more an effort to keep contracts in place at this point. It's something you have to think about when you're older, where when you're younger, it just seems like things are being shoved in your face. Does that get nerve-wracking?
No, not really. I like working with a smaller group of people. I don't like having a lot of different partners. The more partners you have, the more obligations you have. That mentality has served me pretty well, especially when changing sponsors. Like I got dropped by Oakley outerwear and Patagonia just came out of the blue. I didn't have to search out for that, which was really nice. But then I was dropped by eyewear. And I haven't necessarily gone out and looked for contracts, but another one kind of fell into my lap. I think because of having good relationships with the companies that you work with allows for other companies to see that you have a lot more value than just being like the face of the brand, I guess.
I look at it as 2013 is when the Oakley outerwear deal ends. While that's got to bum you out at first because you're not used to losing sponsors, it's really a huge opportunity for you. You get a phone call. You don't really have to do anything. Patagonia wants to work with you. When I look at brands, some brands are different than others. You look in the energy drink space per se, and Red Bull is doing things above and beyond what the rest of the brands are doing for their athletes. When I look at Patagonia in the outerwear space, it seems like they're one of those companies that goes above and beyond for their athletes and does things a different way. How is it working with a brand like that?
It's great. They're incredibly supportive. They want to support their athletes in as many ways as they can, of course, and support their dreams in a fairly holistic way. We present them with trips and projects and things, and then they'll come back and like fully flush the ideas out and see if that's something that's compatible with their mentality and values and focus. It's been great working with them.
Yeah, and it lines up with everything that you are as a person in terms of values. It's a perfect fit. You lose a few sponsors throughout the years. Who did you have in the height and who fell off over the years?
let's see. I mean, K2, Oakley, Marker, and then I had a lot of small ones at that time, like Joystick. What else?
Were you ever on Decine?
Yeah, and I was on Decine for quite a while. That was one I was missing.
When these things start ending, and it's more recent than anything, things are changing in your life as well. I mean, you are almost married, you have a baby on the way, and that's exciting for a professional skier, but I would think it'd be scary as shit too. And is that when you start thinking about going back to school, when you realize, hey, I need money coming in, I'm going to have 2 kids, a wife, and I need to be able to pay for things?
Yeah, that was certainly part of it. Another part was I didn't feel like I was fully intellectually engaged in the things that I was doing.
There's not much critical thinking in the action sports world.
No, exactly. There was that. There was also the responsibility component and longevity of your ski career. I think I've been asked since I was maybe 24 years old, like, how long do you think you can do this for? And my answer is always maybe indefinitely. But when you think of the realities of like the responsibilities entwined with raising a family and planning for your retirement or just later in life, that reality, I think, kind of hit me when my first kid was due. So yeah, I enrolled back in school. And
are you the old guy in class?
Surprisingly not. I mean, the majority of my classes now are online, but for the first 4 semesters when I was going to school, I was certainly one of the older ones, but not the oldest.
Did people recognize you?
Yeah, quite a few people recognize me.
So you're in school, but I think you also start working with your mom managing her latest venture. And what is that?
Her latest venture has been what's consumed her for the past 34 years. She's run a gourmet food manufacturing company for quite a while and has always needed help in the operations side. And also, she's been wanting to get out of the business for probably 5 years or so and kind of looking for a succession plan, whether that was within her family or elsewhere, and presented me with the opportunity, or kind of like the last ditch effort, like, this opportunity is here for you if you are interested in it, but if you're not, let me know and we'll look at other possibilities. So I thought hard about it and said, well, let me see what I can do in operations, and like, if it's something that I think I can manage and control effectively and it's something that I'm passionate about or like become passionate about, then we can have further conversations down the line. So yeah, for the past 10 months, I'd been integrating myself into the company, flying out to Oregon twice a month for a week out of every month while going to school and still trying to manage my ski career.
Is this your first real job?
More or less. Yeah. I mean, I've worked for the company for stints here and there, but mostly doing manual labor or working in production.
Yep. But now you're a desk jockey and managing the business itself?
More like managing the internal departments between the plant manager, production managers, and then the administrative functions and sourcing. Mostly focusing my time on production facility optimization.
Okay.
Figuring out our processes and how to make those processes more efficient while paying attention to the quality of the product. It was a huge crash course in food safety, QA, and food production.
Totally different than backcountry safety, but probably more lucrative in the long run.
I don't know. I think it's probably the opposite. With QA, there's so many different parameters and specifications that you have to adhere to that you end up having to spend more money for like testing of the food, and you end up losing a lot more, or like cutting into your margins a lot more.
Well, let's get to something a lot more fun. I'm going to fast forward to recently. You were recruited to join Matt Sturbins on his new project, and you're comfortable on K2, although I think it's tough for you to probably ever feel comfortable with anyone anymore based on how business has gone throughout the years. But you feel good at K2. It seems like things are coming around with the brand. And then I think Matt takes you on a little courtship and seeing if you're willing to take the risk to work with him. And what is the process of talking you into working with him?
Initially, he was like, hey, do you have any interest in helping me launch this brand? Like, we talked about the brand fairly substantially, and I was totally intrigued by the material process and material innovation platform that they were using. I was like, well, I have about 6 more months on my contract. I don't think I can really do anything until then. And there are a lot of other details we would need to iron out beforehand and see if this relationship could work financially and et cetera, et cetera. Plus, on the back burner, I'm also trying to fully divert from the ski industry and join my parents' company. So I had a ton going on, and I was like, well, I don't really necessarily just want to be an athlete. If there is another way I can get involved, let's talk about that. And Matt goes to Charles and says, hey, Pep is certainly interested, but he would like to integrate himself more into the company. What do you think about that? And he was really excited about that prospect. Came to Salt Lake City like the next week, and we sat down and kind of talked through like what that involvement could look like. And he said, how about you come out to Berkeley and check out our facility? We can teach you about what we're doing, our overall vision, and you get to meet all of the people, because the people that you work with are kind of the most important aspect of a business, how everybody communicates with each other and actually gets things done.
Having a good culture is important.
Indeed. So yeah, I flew out there and loved what they were doing. And they said, of course, it'll take a bit of risk on everybody's part. I mean, everybody is really, really passionate about this project and are willing to take sacrifices for it. And I think that really connected with me. All of the people are very, very intelligent, and the conversations you could have with any of the people in that room at any particular time can be very compelling and forward thinking and expand your mind to the capabilities of their particular product, or simply an environmental conversation or a health conversation or whatever conversation you want to have. Like, they'll have some sort of like genuine insight, and using your brain is fun.
But it's also super risky to leave your long-term ski sponsor, and you did it. Was your wife backing it?
She was backing it to an extent, but she was also like, we really need to explore all the potential opportunities. Can you go back to K2 and see if there is a role like they're offering you at Wonder at K2, and just kind of compare all of the different opportunities? And I, of course, did my due diligence, but my heart was really like with this company already. She's like, you're probably just going to sign with them regardless of what they come back with, aren't you? And I'm like, well, yeah, probably.
The new project, it's a new ski line, and in true Matt Sturbin's fashion, it's called Wonder Alpine without vowels. It's a ski company started by a biotech company, Checker Spot, and they have the technology to change the game, and the whole company's built on building things in a completely different way than ever thought, with algae. First, what's your title there?
I'm the VP of Marketing and Product Development.
So your second job has a really heavy title, VP of Marketing and Development. Are you still in school and working for the family business, or are you just a VP right now?
Yes, I'm doing all of the above.
So you're a busy, busy man. What does the role entail? I know it's brand new, but what have you been doing and what will you be doing?
A lot of it's been educating myself. I mean, we have weekly materials meetings and then back-end meetings regarding the procurement of the oils themselves, and then other projects that Checker Spot is doing that are exclusive from Wonder Alpine. And then with Wonder, we have sales, marketing, our product meetings. We're trying to understand how to deal with our waste streams, which is a very, very interesting conversation. And we're already making a lot of headway and progress on that front. And then it's also trying to figure out our digital marketing campaign and how the user experiences and the customer experiences on our platform, but also the messaging behind the brand, the company's values, and of course, like being honest about what we're doing and being very critical about how we speak about the things that we're doing. And of course, we can't divulge too much at this point, but we also are really excited about the future. We're also very excited about the things that we're doing now. It's certainly multifaceted at this point. I'm not solely focused on just marketing and product development, since The team here at the design lab is 6 people.
And the goal of the company, I mean, Checker Spot turns algal gels into a polyurethane-ish-like material that's sustainable. It features amazing strength to weight ratio combined with dampening. All that stuff right there sounds really intriguing to a ski material guy, because the dampening and strength to weight ratio is what's really important when you're building a ski. What percentage of new material will be in one of these skis?
Okay, so just to catch you.
Yeah, catch me.
The skis that we're making are certainly not more sustainable than the next guys. And it could be argued that since we're cutting out a piece of the core and putting our algal polyol foam in replacement of that wood, you're removing a natural bio product and putting in a product that has bioderivatives, but also other chemicals integrated into it.
Okay.
So it can be argued that they're not more sustainable, but our impetus for the brand is all about performance driven characteristics. And we defined our objective ski style. We're positioned in the backcountry realm. So we want something that has an optimal weight for the uphill, but also has those performance characteristics on the way down. In order to achieve that, you need to find some weight saving in the core, but you don't want to degrade the functionality of the ski.
Yep.
And we're able to achieve that by integrating this algal core composite. That does have better dampening characteristics compared to other foams and strength to weight ratios. So at this point, that component is pretty small. I would say maybe 5% of the ski. I actually don't know the statistics on that.
Yep, it'll all come out.
I just made that up. Yeah, it's very small. But the components that we're developing in the future, we're planning on having essentially 50% of the interior materials come from our bio-based technology platform.
So that'll be a significant portion of it. And what are the benefits of these materials? Have you skied them a bunch? And what do you notice when you're on snow?
So, unfortunately, due to the timing of my involvement, I haven't gotten to ski them a lot. Matt, as a friend, said, hey, would you like to test some of these skis back in February? And I said, yeah, sure. I'd jump on a pair for a few runs. So I had a couple runs in February. I helped him with another test in late March or early April. And then I got on his final version for 3 runs. I got on the cambered version of the ski at Snowbird, and I had a blast. They're really quick, edge to edge for a 110 ski. I did notice they were very, very smooth, especially at mid-range speeds. At high speeds, if you're going to have any kind of rocker, you're going to have some sort of vibration.
Yep.
And of course, I didn't have anything to directly compare it to. So it felt very similar to most other skis in that category. Besides that, it did feel less twitchy. It just had a nice, really balanced feel to it, I guess.
What's the price point of the ski going to be?
$799.
Okay, so it's going to be priced competitively with other skis, and when you're paying $800 for a ski, you're most likely going to get something that's fun. Sure, if you skied 10 different pairs of skis that were $800, you'd be able to fine-tune which one was the best for you, but it sounds like you've skied them already, and they're a fun ski that's playful, and that's what you're looking for. And you're looking to make a difference in the way that you're building the skis and the long-term goals and values of the company.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really neat that I didn't get to ski the full rocker version, but I think it's a really neat addition to have a ski that has similar the skis are essentially identical besides the profile differences. And I think that's a really neat component as a part of the line. You can have something that's way more nimble and quick and super playful, and it has more powder focus, but you also have that counterpart. The ski is still going to handle fairly similarly.
It's got to be one of the most exciting times in your career. I mean, in the beginning of your career, obviously that's going to be the most exciting when you're making a name for yourself. But now you're given the keys to help actually impact product. Where at K2, when you had pro models, sure, you're able to ski some prototypes and give a little bit of feedback here and there. But engineers and marketers are always going to have their hands in it as well. Now the keys are in your hand and you understand how the skis ski, You've got smart people behind you in terms of engineers that are creating new materials, and you're in a place where your career is ready to blossom behind a desk.
I like how you got to that point. I'm going to be skiing, hopefully, the majority of days this season. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the future and being a part of this brand. Yeah, it's been very, very exciting kind of getting involved. And, it's also a bit of a daunting task with a small crew to figure out all the nitty gritty components. And we're obviously getting into like the buying season. So there are a lot of aspects that I didn't have to focus on prior in my career. It was like, oh, we have this marketing agenda. Like, here you go. Could you post about this? And now I'm like, oh, I'm the guy who's setting that marketing agenda and figuring out all the nitty gritty, which is also really fun because I do have like the keys and lots of ideas.
Well, it's nice that you're going to be able to hopefully tell other people to post, because I remember when I was in a position to try to get you to post, it didn't go so well given the past month and a half. You've been amazing on social media. It's been great to see you tell the stories of K2. Was that part of your contract, or did you do that out of the goodness of your heart?
No, I did that out of the goodness of my heart.
Okay, because that was really cool to see you walk through the old days. Speaking through walk through the old days, I have a part of the show called Inappropriate Questions. And I was texting with a guy, Ryan Schmees, who is a K2 designer. I think he was responsible for all of your pro models.
Yeah, he was responsible for all of the graphics.
Yes, the graphics. He's a funny dude who's a friend of both of ours. And I wanted Ryan to come up with 3 inappropriate questions. But I think he confused my messages to him, and he emailed me over a set of normal questions, and we didn't record them. So I'm going to give you some of Ryan's normal questions, and I've got some inappropriate questions to throw in here as well. First, what is your most memorable ski trip for the wrong reasons?
I don't know. I feel like every ski trip I do is for the right reasons, because I want to go ski and have a good time.
Like flights canceled, people go to jail, they lost your bags.
So we had an Oakley trip up to Retallick, the cat skiing operation, and I had been previously denied from Canada, but Greg was like, "You'll be fine, we'll get through, no big deal." And I was like, okay, I guess it's worth a try. And we flew in. I think we landed at like 10:30 at night in Spokane and drove up to the border. We got to the border right before the crossing closed. And of course, we hand them all of our passports. And then, the officer's like, "Pep Fujas, can you please come inside for a minute?" And go inside. And they're like, "You've been previously denied entry to Canada due to your DUI, and you haven't resolved this issue. So we're going to have to go ahead and deny your entry." And of course, I'm with like the whole Oakley team and Strokes, and they had to drive me back to the airport, and I didn't get to go skiing. And everybody else, they had to like stay in Spokane that night. I really threw a wrench into the whole scenario.
We did Inappropriate Questions with Julian Carr 3 years ago. We talked about that whole story, so I might cut that in here so people have some background on it.
When I was 22 in Mammoth, me and a friend of mine, we hated this nightclub called Fever that was next to the Dublin gates, and there was like a little rope that you could just kind of walk over, and we thought it was going to be a great idea to go and like rob them. So we stole a couple bottles of alcohol from behind the bar, went outside, and we're like, well, I don't know what we should do now because all of our friends were inside. So we like went back inside, and probably within like 5 minutes, some bouncers grabbed us and all the lights got turned on, and, we got arrested for breaking and entering, even though we just walked across the rope. And they charged us per shot that they would have made for the bottles that we stole. So it was like a felony.
Whoa.
It was absurd. We ended up going to jail for 5 days until our arraignment.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Up in Bridgeport. It was pretty casual, and I ended up signing some autographs for some people when I left, which was kind of funny. But yeah, they dropped it down to a misdemeanor. The next time, actually, I was going up with Oakley. We flew into Bellingham when we're driving up, and they pulled me to the side. I think it was like 11:30 at night or something ridiculous. They just denied me. They said, "Here, you have 2 infractions. if you have any kind of two misdemeanors, they're at liberty to deny you. And so they did. And there's so many hoops you have to jump through to get back in, so much paperwork. It took me like 7 years to get a lawyer and go through the whole process, get like letters of recommendation and notable people to vouch for my character. Mike Goot wrote a letter, and Greg Strokes and a few others. Yeah, that's why I couldn't go to Canada. It was really, really unfortunate.
Second question from Ryan. What does skiing need, and is the sport in a good place?
Skiing needs what WNDR Alpine is doing. I think that the ski industry is a pretty dirty industry. A lot of other industrial complex focused manufacturing plants, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of space for this environmental component, certainly because everybody who's a skier loves the outdoors, and I'm sure they'd like it to continue that way and for their children. As far as the sport is concerned, I mean, the things that are happening are really incredible to watch. There's still tons of progression and creativity, and I mean, that's really exciting for me on a day-to-day basis to go on.
When you see triples and quads, do you like seeing that, or is that more aerials to you?
For a long time, it was more aerials to me, but I think it just depends on the people who are doing it and how they're executing it. The variation of grabs and body position, and I like things that don't look super rushed. And when people can perform and do stuff that way, then I really like it, and some I just don't like.
So you're waiting for a very slow quad.
Yeah, you need like 180-foot jump.
Now I'll go to the last two questions. I know they were supposed to be 3, but we're going to go with 4. And these don't come from Ryan. They're 2 ones that I'm throwing in here. You live with Tanner Hall. He is one of my favorite skiers out there. I think he's one of everybody's favorite skiers. But he's polarizing as well, because there's Tanner, and then there's Tanner when it seems like he goes a little crazy, when he has his Tanner moments, my favorite of which was when he took the microphone at the Powder Awards. What is your best Tanner moment?
What is my best Tanner moment? I certainly remember the Powder Awards tirade. Shoot, I remember quite a few premieres where he's very impassioned about people doing things for the right reasons. And I don't know, I guess I don't ever want to hurt people's feelings, so it's hard for me to get detailed on specifics.
Well, my final inappropriate question. Have you ever had a car accident in Europe?
Funny you should ask. Yeah, I had a pretty spectacular crash at probably 3 o'clock in the morning with Nate Abbott. We were in Courchevel. There was a ski contest there, and we were also shooting for a Matchstick movie. And we were with Freeze at the time. Yeah, we were doing all these different shoots, and we had one big night out, and I certainly shouldn't have been driving in the first place. Well, actually, I wasn't driving, but we drove Sarah Burke up to her place. It was tons of knife turn switchbacks up to where she was staying. And I think Nate jumped out of the car. He had something to grab from her hotel. Anyways, I was like, oh, I'll just turn around the car. And I turned around the car, and we hauled ass back down the road, and we were driving way too fast, and he was pulling the e-brake around the corners, and we certainly were going way too fast on one of the corners, and the car didn't turn, and we went straight off one of these switchbacks.
Whoa.
The hood of the car landed on a big boulder and stopped us from tumbling down the rest of the slope, and also missed both of us. Anyways, we kind of dazed, got out of the car, and we're oh my God, I can't believe what happened. We walked back down the road, and the car, it was Fred Photo's car. It was his rental car. And we wanted to tell him the news. And of course, he wasn't very happy about that. And prior to getting in the car, we came back to our place and we're Fred, we need a car to take Sarah home. And he's dude, no car. You can't drive a car. Actually, his precise words were, no keys. No keys. And then we found the keys and took the car. So he was worried he was going to get blacklisted off of all of the rental car agencies lists. And he was I'm going to say you guys stole the car. And we were oh my God, this is terrible. But We called a tow truck in the morning, got the car towed. No police were involved in the whole scenario.
Lucky.
The car was totaled. I think we paid probably $300 a piece, and that was it.
Wow. Well, that's a nice way to get out of totaling a car. No arrest, $300. That's a good night right there. You probably learned a lesson not to do that again.
Indeed.
And at this point, I want to thank you for your time, man. I have been around for a lot of your career and seen you come in and out of the office when I was there. And it was always a pleasure to have you come through. You're one of the nicer guys in the sport, and I'm happy to call you a friend, and thanks for doing the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure, buddy. Appreciate it.
So that was time with an absolute legend. And the thing I take away from Pep's career was that off the hill, he really didn't have to do that much to make his business happen. Everything in his world came from people seeing him and reaching out to him. He's not the type to send out sponsor me videos. And whether it was Oakley, K2, Patagonia, or Wonder Alpine, all he had to do was answer the phone and be Pep, and he had a job. I'm not saying Pep doesn't work hard, because he works his ass off. But what he's really good at is maximizing all of these opportunities that come his way. And in Pep's old world, that's how things worked. I think his new world is going to be a whole new reality. Getting a full season of days in while being a fully functional vice president is a hard thing to do, but I don't doubt that Pep will crush it. That's the show for this week. Now, I want to ask you to review me wherever you listen to me. If you're on an iPhone, here's what you need to do. Hit the podcast icon, search for the Powell Movement, click my logo, scroll down to where you see 5 stars, hit 5 stars, and you're done. It takes about 20 seconds, and it's greatly appreciated. I also ask that you support my great sponsors. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Thanks for listening, and have a great week, everyone.